Hello and thank you for taking your time to talk about your latest movie, Diabolic. I really enjoyed watching it. Wait, I have to change my yes. And my first question would be, it says, I mean, you probably get this a lot. It says it's based on true events. Um, Normally that means there's like a case, a special case that you talk about. Is this the case here, or is it just what's the truest part about this movie?
Yeah, sure. First of all, great to be here, and thanks for having me. The true story element is pretty cool because one of the co-writers, Tisha Madsen, she was actually in the Mormon Church, and she did have an affair, which I don't want to spoil too much for those who haven't seen the movie, but there's something that happens in the movie that's a bit risque for the church, and she was excommunicated because of that, and kind of still doesn't to this day interact with a lot of her family and things who are still in the church. So that part is the true story part. Is all the FLDS, the fundamentalist Latter Day Saint component, is all really accurate as to what happened, including what happened with her parents and all of that stuff. That scene that's in the movie is like pretty close to what really happened. So yeah, obviously the witch part is not really true. That's a made up bit. Sorry everybody for those hoping that was the true bit. But the FLDS stuff, yeah, certainly really happened.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I read that you and Mike Harding and Tisha Madsen came up with the story. How did it translate to a script? How did that work? Did she tell you her story and then you wrote it, or how did that work?
Yeah, so the way the story kind of originated is that I had, after coming off my first film, Awoken, I really wanted to do another horror, but I wanted to do something a little bit more elevated that was, a little bit more psychological. And certainly, I've always loved witch movies, more modern witch movies that kind of, lean into that side of things. And I wanted to do something about that. But I didn't really have a hook into the story. It was just kind of the horror elements were there, and I sort of knew some of the visuals and set pieces I wanted to do, but I didn't really have a way into the story yet. And then I was introduced to Mike Harding through our, we've got the same management, introduced to him, and him and Tisha are actually married. And he sort of said, oh, I've got this idea for this horror film, and he had a script, and I had my script, and we kind of smashed them together and created Diabolic out of that. So it was lots of Tisha and Mike and I sitting down and talking for hours and hours about everything that happened and what to take from where. And so we'll take this bit and take that bit, and that bit doesn't really fit. And yeah, coming up with a story that you see on the screen.
Oh, interesting. I mean, the main part is the Fundamentalist Church of the Latter-day Saints. Did you know about this part of the Mormon Church, or was it something completely new to you?
Yeah, I'd heard about the FLDS early on because I'm pretty fascinated by cults in general. I think cults are pretty fascinating things, and one of the most interesting things about cults is that they normally attract people with really high IQs, which is really sort of what you would not necessarily think would be the case. But that's normally the case is that people that get into cults are normally very, very intelligent people. So I was really fascinated by that kind of contradiction. And I was sort of aware of the FLDS, like their existence. Like I'd heard of Warren Jeffs, but I didn't really know much about it. And when I started learning about it from Tisha and from Mike, that's when I really started doing my research and watching everything I could and reading everything I could. And there's a lot of stuff out there now about it. So it was not the most fun thing to research at times. They do some pretty crazy stuff. So, but yeah.
Yes. I mean, one part of this is that I mean, the baptism where they baptist the dead people, kind of. I mean, that's how,
Mm.
so they can get into heaven. But one other part is that I mean, if this is this a spoiler? I don't think so. The two people from the church come back and do a ritual with the main character, so she, gets better, kind of. And they are doing a drug ritual. Was that completely made up, or is this something that the FLDS actually does practice?
Yeah, so well, the baptism for the dead was we can start there. That's something that when I first read it, I was like, oh, this is such a cool because that was Mike's. Mike and Harding injected that into the script, and that was always the opening scene. And I'd read it and I was kind of like, oh wow, this is such a cool, like, interesting horror sequence to come up with. What a fascinating brain Mike Harding has. And he still has a fascinating brain. But when I spoke to him, he was like, no, no, they really do this. And I was like, what? How the hell can they actually do this? So when we looked at it more, it's definitely not as dark and creepy, as we make it in the movie. We take a little bit of license there, but they really do that. They really baptize people by proxy for like saying John Wayne and Anne Frank and all these people and dunking these poor young girls who have no idea what's going on. So yeah, that was definitely a big eye opener to me. And like in relation to the drug stuff, they absolutely did do that, and still do that. So there's, Joseph Smith. I mean, someone who goes out into the wilderness and finds a bunch of golden plates that tell him about. I mean, guy was high as fuck, right? Like he was, he was definitely juicing, and yeah, like that carried through. I mean, it makes a lot of sense if you read something about someone seeing a vision of an angel visiting them. They're just on some very very good drugs that are getting them to that place.
It's
So that sort of evolved over time, and then the FLDS used those as kind of like healing, properties, because their mind transcends their current space and time, and they feel they've had a transformative experience. And from what we read, apparently it works a lot of the time. If people are kind of sick or they're injured, they just have some drugs, and after that, they're fine. So that's probably why they were doing it, I guess.
I mean, this has nothing to do with the movie, but because you talked about the funny history of the Mormon church, did you ever see the Book of Mormons, the
Oh,
musical?
the musical. Love it. Yeah, I mean, it's great. I love everything those guys do. Trey Parker and Matt Stone, they're geniuses. So yeah, that was pretty funny. Pretty, yeah, I loved it. Loved it.
Okay. Um, and the building where the baptism takes place, was that built or was that something you found somewhere actually?
That is all 100% built. So yeah, the film was shot in South Australia, in a place called Mount Crawford Forest, which is a pine tree plantation. And we spent a lot of time trying to find that open area that's in the film there. That was incredibly difficult to get. And then we only had enough money to build two sides of that building. So you'll notice you only ever see it from one side or directly in front, because on the other side it's just completely hollow and empty and there's nothing there at all. So we built that kind of the two sides there and the roof. And then when we go into the interiors, that's all built inside the studio as well. So yeah, all completely fabricated.
I mean, you said that it was only two sides of the building. It's probably hard to get such a niche horror film financed, right?
Yeah, I wish I could say it's super easy and everybody should jump out there and yeah, it's difficult. I mean, it's hard to make any movie, and anyone who's made a movie certainly knows that it's unbelievably difficult. And yeah, but it's kind of the cliche is true that sort of having limited funds and budget really does sort of push you in ways you probably wouldn't anticipate you're capable of sort of rising to, or challenges you're rising to, because it really puts you under pressure to come up with different solutions. And it's sort of liberating in a way, because I imagine it's like you're sitting there scrolling on a streaming service with a million choices and it takes you half an hour, and then you realize, oh, it's too late now, I've got to go to bed, I can't watch anything. You're sort of crippled by choice. Whereas when you've got those parameters making a movie, there are only a few options, and you've really got to rack the brain to go, okay, cool, how are we going to get out of this? What are we going to do here? And people were like, oh, we'll just VFX the whole baptistry, the building. And it's like, no, we can't do that. That sucks. So yeah, building that side of it, I think that if we had built the other side of it, it would have been kind of a waste of money. I don't think we would have needed to see it. So it's sort of stuff like that, you end up being thankful for.
Another design aspect was LaRue, the witch. How did I mean she's pretty scary. How does the overall design of her came along?
Yeah, so the design of LaRue, was probably the longest thing, like took the longest out of any design element or anything in the film to really work on, because there's so much of this stuff out there. Like there's so many monsters and witches and creatures and old ladies that are, all that kind of stuff. So I guess, like, by and large for Diabolic, what I wanted to do was be original within the genre and turn some tropes on their head, and also have some things that felt familiar, but just use them in a different way. I didn't want to sort of have, just do something different for the sake of it being different. I don't really think that's the best way to do things. So with LaRue, we sort of started from theme first to understand, well, what does this character really represent? What is she? Why is she? What are the rules of this presence and witch and force? And what we sort of ended up designing is that basically LaRue is the representation of all of the wronged women of the church. She is kind of that. She embodies all that revenge that over hundreds and hundreds of years, to be personified in a physical presence. And in order to do that, that's why she's wearing a pink dress. It's sort of it's a very simple and perhaps rudimentary way to sort of explain femininity, having something pink. But we can't explain it, so we have to have something there. And I think that sort of stained pink dress is kind of, all about that kind of stain on what the traditional idea of a woman's supposed to be in this cult or church. And the hair being pulled out as well is the same thing. It's like, women are kind of pressured, and especially in that church, to have long hair and have their hair done up in a certain way, and you must look like this and conform to this. And so she's pulled her hair out the whole time. That's why hair as a motif through the film is kind of used quite a few times for that kind of reason. And her face was, we wanted to make her as scary as possible and look like she's kind of hacked at her own face, and kind of give her some of those sort of traditional witch features. And it was probably like the 12th or 13th design of the face. We did sculptures, we did all kinds of stuff to kind of get there. And yeah, like I think LaRue is really cool. I think I was really happy with the way she turned out. And, just by showing her just a little bit as well, not too much, I think like we just show her, she's not on screen. I think it's like probably less than a minute in total of actual face time, or 2 minutes maybe. But it's enough to sort of stick with people. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you talked about hair. That's the only thing I can't take when I watch horror movies, is when people uh, get something out of their
This
mouth.
is the
I
movie for
really
you then.
hate
So
that. Yeah, but there were two other scenes that really impressed me. Was the one where I'm going to call it the bone killing. That was pretty
oh yeah,
nice.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And the one where the main character gets into the basement and starts digging, that was pretty scary for me. So you decided for practical effects because it was a budget thing, or do you like it more than a visual?
Oh, I love practical effects. I just think they're better. I mean, like I think it's probably would be surprising to people how many visual effects are actually in this movie. It looks like there's kind of none, and that's very deliberate. I think that visual effects should be there only if you can't afford to do it properly, which sounds really simple, but it's actually not used that way a lot. Sometimes a lot of people do it for convenience, or because they think it looks better or it gives them more flexibility later. I'm a big planner. I love to make sure that what I'm executing on set is pretty much exactly what I planned. And things come up and change on the day, and all those things, and in post you keep changing. But I think going in with a really solid plan is really important. If you don't go in there with a plan, it's like, oh, we'll just figure that out later, and chucks, we didn't have the money for that. And also, like, I think it's become a bit of a cliche for directors and filmmakers to be like, "Oh, practical effects," and everyone goes, "The Thing," and all that. They talk about all. So yes, I've seen The Thing, and yes, it's great and all that stuff. But I think that it genuinely just looks better. Like there's a tangible thing that you get better performances out of actors because they're physically interacting with something, and it's good for me too. I have to use my imagination a lot when you're directing a movie, and if there's something physically there, it takes away a little bit of the mystery for me as well, because I know what I'm getting. And so I think VFX, and VFX in this movie have been used to augment physical things that are there already, and just tidy up some things that maybe we didn't have the money to get the best prosthetic or the best effect or whatever it is. Like there's a scene where someone gets thrown across the room. They're on a cable and wires and all that stuff. We took the wires out with visual effects. Like I think those are kind of the things you should use VFX for, and And it's also heaps of fun getting in there with blood and guts and bits of prosthetic and stuff, and that's part of the fun of doing it, right? So yeah, I love physical effects.
Okay. Great. Last short question. Is there any horror movie that you're looking forward this year?
Ooh,
Putting you
ooh,
on the spot. Sorry.
yeah. Any horror film I'm looking forward to this year? Um, oh gosh,
Okay, I'm so
gotta
sorry.
pick one. No, that's all right. That's a really good question. I mean, I no, I can't really think of one right now. There's lots fluttering around in my head, but I didn't think about that. So it's still early days. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
What about you? What are you looking forward to this year?
Oh, there's a lot. I mean, and the new Evil Dead is probably
Oh yeah,
hopefully going to be a
the
good
new
one.
Evil Dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
And Elizabeth Cullen, who's in Diabolic, was just cast in the next Evil Dead,
Oh,
which is pretty cool. So that just got announced the other day. So that's great. Future Scream Queen right there.
great. And there's the connection. Yeah. Thank you very much for this interview. It was very fun. I hope your movie is very successful and you can do another horror movie soon.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for your time.